Ammo manufacturers hate this one simple trick that cuts down on your ammunition's size and weight with no loss of performance. Seems too good to be true? Well, it isn't. Click here to learn more about the marvelous folded ammunition. This ammo has my wife satisfied every night, my energy back, and you can get these wonderful benefits too. All you have to do is watch this video to learn more. But Big Ammo doesn't want you to know this, so we act fast. We don't know how long this video will remain up before they force us to take it down. Act now before it's too late with this one simple trick.
Today we'll be talking about probably the strangest type of ammunition to ever be devised. While everyone else was thinking about flechettes and rapid fire, one man at Frankford Arsenal was asking, what if we just folded the cartridge in half? In today's episode of the Dead Calibers Archive, we'll be looking at the strangest ammunition that you've probably never even heard of, Andrew J. Grandy's folded ammunition concept, and its goals that in some way still live on today. I'm Anders E.T. Herzberg, and this is the Dead Calibers Archive. Stay tuned. Cap and Ball Digital Strategies is a two-way focused digital marketing agency founded to help FFLs and others catering to the 2A space grow and deal with the complex world of digital marketing, offering services from organic search marketing, email marketing, social media management, and more. We want to help your 2A business succeed. So if you are an FFL, gunsmith, or serve the 2A community, visit capandballseo.com to learn more about how we can help you grow your bottom line. Before diving into the history of the folded ammunition concept, I think we should take a moment to look at the history and surrounding projects of the era to better understand why folding a cartridge in half was not quite as absurd as it might sound to us today. Now, in the 1950s and 60s, we did have the Special Purpose Individual Weapons Program, or SPIW. Firearms history nerds will probably recognize this as a bit of a catch-all term for not just the SPIW program, but other various programs that kept popping up well into the 1980s. But technically, there were a number of different programs that were created. They tested various weapon designs, and each one was eventually dropped due to failure to realize either improvements over existing systems, or those programs were simply too impractical to deploy properly as a complete weapons system. Now, to give you an idea of what was being experimented with here, for those who are not familiar, we're talking about flechette firing guns that shot rounds at 2400 RPM, triple flechette cartridges were developed, duplex rounds were created with 2 bullets stuffed into a single shell case, even a flechette firing grenade launcher was developed as part of this era. Basically, everything was on the table so long as it was lightweight and fast firing. The whole concept was to increase the probability for an individual soldier to hit the target that they were aiming at. Now, early concepts such as the Salvo project wanted to look at faster, lighter projectiles that would have less recoil and improve hit probability. However, when just about everything was open for consideration, the designs got a little crazy. However, there have been some lasting impacts from the SPIW project and the follow-on programs. Now, the famed H&K G11, the Kraut Space Magic Rifle, that was an entry into the Advanced Combat Rifle program. The AR-15 would never have been adopted if the idea of a lighter, faster projectile had not been considered in the first place. Burst fire capabilities. This is a conceptual holdover from these programs of the SPIW and Salvo era. And if nothing else, the SPIW program did create a lasting emphasis on improving soldiers' ability to hit a target, either through equipment, weapons, or training. In short, how can we make it easier for an individual soldier to carry more ammo and/or hit more often? Today we know the answer is often better optics, better training, but we had to learn that. Now, hopefully with a better idea of the conceptual atmosphere of the time, we get to our protagonist for this story, Andrew J. Grandy. I regret to inform you at this time I currently don't have a large amount of biographical information for Andrew J. Grandy. However, it appears that he was something of a prolific inventor. Patents that bear his name include one for a pivotally mounted stock, cartridge links, a recoilless rifle breech design, blank magazines, and a new method for manufacturing ammunition, among several others. After his work at Frankford Arsenal, he would leave and found his own company, GTG, and continued working and developing concepts and ideas. He was also involved in the International Cartridge Collectors Association, even producing commemorative cartridges for his own design for them with a GTG head stamp. Examples can be seen floating around the collector's market still today. Yet this design, the idea that's his claim to fame, his most absurd idea, his most revolutionary idea, maybe? Radical departure from common sense, perhaps? This was the concept of the folded ammunition cartridge. But why? Why take a proven, time-tested design of the inline cartridge and start messing with it? Well, Grandy did want to accomplish a few things with this particular design. Now, I'm sure most of my viewers know that a standard case has all of its components in a straight line. Primer, bullet, powder, all surrounded by the casing. However, to create something more compact and decrease the weight of the cartridge, Grandy's concept moved the powder charge from in line with the bullet to the side of the bullet. This U-shaped design allowed for the cartridge to be more efficient in its use of the volume, saving weight and either increasing the number of rounds that an individual soldier could carry or increase their mobility. I'm sure those of you who have served are familiar with the old adage, pounds equal pain. And this particular concept of the folded ammunition did in some way try to address the problem of the weight of the ammunition itself, something we are still trying to deal with to this day. While the space and weight savings were notable, the folded ammunition concept, or FABRL, Fabril maybe? You tell me. Frankford Arsenal Ballistics Research Lab round showed a 29% decrease in packing volume, and it could be a ballistic twin of the 5.56 ammo at the time if loaded correctly. However, the idea did not come without its own set of challenges. First, let's talk about the shape. Well, I'm sure most of you are experienced with rods going into and being extracted from cylindrical openings. The folded design had more inherent complications than most girls you'll find at the local bar. With conventional cartridges, you can load them in any orientation, so long as you have the bullet pointed in the correct direction. Now, with these, folded ammunition requires precise alignment. Only one orientation could allow for feeding, so feeding had to be tightly controlled. Another interesting outcome of this design is that the powder charge starts burning closer to the projectile, instead of at the furthest point from the projectile. Theoretically, this would allow for a more complete combustion of the powder charge. Now, to test this ammunition, both an M16A1 as well as a FAL were heavily modified, with changes to key components to facilitate the use of this new folded ammunition in these two test rifles. Unfortunately, we don't have good surviving images of what these test rifles looked like and how the modifications were done. However, we can make some inferences based off of the patent drawings that are available in the various documentation. First, the chamber appears to have been radically altered, with it being completely redesigned to accommodate this U-shaped cartridge. This likely would have complicated the manufacturing process and really only would have made sense if this particular concept truly took off and entered mass production. Next, the bolt had to be extremely modified as well. Since a traditional extractor was no longer needed, instead an extractor and an ejector were both replaced by an operating rod style system that would extract and eject the cartridges out the bottom of the receiver using a push rod pushing on the base, if you will, of the cartridge itself. Now, in Frankford Arsenal's testing, they did show that it was possible to modify and create a weapon that was able to cycle at a rate of 706 rounds per minute with their modified M16A1 test rifle. But the complications and difficulties didn't end with just getting the barrel chamber right. The U-shaped design meant that more had to be done than just shaping brass. For the cartridge case, steel was used initially. However, versions using polymer were also created as well. The polymer was formed using an injection molding process, and this did offer a lighter weight alternative to other materials such as brass or steel. However, polymer, as I'm sure you realize, does have its own set of challenges. First, you have to think about pressure. Polymers just don't have the same properties as metals, and they're not as effective at containing the high pressures that a cartridge creates. You don't get the same kind of expansion and gas seal that you would with a typical brass case. Next, you have the problem of heat with polymers as well. Brass does take with it a large amount of heat, as it is ejected from the chamber. Polymer, on the other hand, just doesn't do that. This is something that continues to be an impediment to alternative materials being used for case design to this day. Now, in sustained fire, there is a risk of a round cooking off as it enters into the chamber, basically going off before the bolt is fully seated. But this particular issue of heat not being fully removed from the barrel is just one of a number of reasons why polymer and caseless ammunition have had difficulties being fully implemented, particularly because of this cook-off issue. However, it does seem Grandy did have some ideas in mind to take advantage of the unusual materials that were being used in these polymer folded ammunition cases. Several of the drawings do show ideas for interlocking belts or rings of ammunition that could forego the use of traditional links in favor of each round interlocking into the next. Beyond the single projectile 5.56 replacement versions of this round, Grandy did also envision other solutions for the folded ammo concept. First, we'll look at the very sexy sounding 4.32mm tri-bullet folding cartridge test system. From a report dated March 12, 1979, Grandy writes to the commanding general of the U.S. ARDCOM dealing with his tri-bullet design and the accompanying system. Quote, "Obvious system benefits using the tri-bulleted folded cartridge approach include maximum potential to obtain multiple target hits per trigger pull, controlled suppressive fire capability, foolproof qualification of tri-bulleted folded cartridges with matching barrel bores, reduced weight and bulk of the ammunition load at comparable energy levels, and a highly cost-effective complete cartridge." End quote. The testing system that Grandy built for this report did also have another trick up its sleeve: dispersion control. Since the test system used 3 barrels to accommodate the triplex round, the barrels could be spread or compressed to control the spread of the projectiles in flight. While this is my own speculation somewhat, I believe the idea here was to give the potential weapon system something of a capability where you could have the spread of a shotgun when you wanted it, or the accuracy of a rifle when you needed it. I don't think that would have worked out in practice, but it was an interesting idea. Now, looking at the test fixture, we can see the control band at the end of the muzzle for this dispersion. Here we can also get a better look at the design of the folded ammunition before assembly, with primer, casing, powder, and the bullets themselves. While this is a triplex design, the simplex single bullet design followed much of the same pattern in the way it was constructed. Despite a response stating that the concept was, quote, "of interest to the Army," this particular line of experimentation didn't go any farther than this report, as best we can tell. Yet, folded ammunition arguably could do more for larger weapon systems than ones operated by individual soldiers. Despite the focus on smaller 5.56 replacement cartridges, The folded ammunition concept was prototyped in sizes up to 40 millimeters. However, most of the information that I have been able to find or have on hand does revolve around the 30 millimeter variants. Now, in a vehicle-mounted role, particularly in aircraft, space really is at a premium, and packing more ammunition into the same volume would make a lot of sense. So larger variants would have made a greater degree of sense than a quote-unquote 5.56 replacement. On the Cartridge Collectors Forum, Tony Williams wrote that Honeywell developed a version of the folded ammunition for the Ares gun system. A comparison with the 30 by 173 GAU 8A round showed reductions in length of 41%, volume by 24%, and weight by 12%. The shape of the case did also evolve somewhat during development, with a folded version of the 30mm WECOM being further reduced in volume by giving the propellant container itself a more crescent shape, rather than a circular cross-section, and partly wrapping it around the projectile itself. This design also had an advantage over telescoped ammunition, in that the projectile does not have to jump from the cartridge case to the barrel. Yet this was not the only 30mm design that was experimented with. I have on screen for you a saboted flechette cartridge that was envisioned. Furthermore, there was also the flat pack system that sought to take advantage of the folded ammunition concept. Flat pack, for its part, utilized the folded ammunition concept as well, and was meant to replace the 106mm M40 recoilless rifle. The report on the flat pack system describes a design that was envisioned to allow for cartridges to be loaded from inside a vehicle compartment, having multiple firing modes, having reduced complexity, and also having a longer service life than the current fielded equivalents. However, this concept, like the rest of the weapons systems that sought to leverage the folded ammunition concept, never really got off the ground. Now, today we are still very much trying to solve many of the same kinds of problems: weight, volume, and others. Despite conceptual improvements, like many attempts at creating a new weapon system from this era, the benefits of switching to folded ammunition were simply not large enough to justify the massive changeover from conventional ammunition types. While the folded ammunition concept is regulated to the history books, experimentation with alternative case design does still continue. We do still see polymer case concepts being experimented with. You can look at True Velocity and their polymer ammunition for modern examples. Furthermore, we also have other alternative case designs, such as what's being used on the 277 Fury and the shell casings that have been developed by Shell Shock Technologies. Both of those are trying to make progress over the standard brass case design without radically changing the form factor. Now, it may be that Grandy's idea was simply ahead of its time, and currently we're just waiting for material science to catch up, but only time will tell. I want to thank you for watching, and would like to encourage you to like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you would like to see more from the Dead Calibers archive, we do have a dedicated email list where you can sign up and receive new notifications when we post new entries into the archive. Finally, I want to thank John Boland for not only letting me know about these unique cartridges, but also providing some additional resources that were extremely helpful in fleshing out further the history of folded ammunition. I recommend you check him out on Instagram and Twitter. Links will be in the description below. So, until next time, I'm Anders E.T. Herzberg for the Dead Calibers archive, hoping to see you all again real soon.
Gunsmith, the best in the land, with a steady-eyed aim and a rock-steady hand. He swore on his life there.
In today's episode of the Dead Calibers archives, we'll be taking Grandy. Before diving into the history of the folded ammunition concept, I think we should take a moment to look at the history and the surrounding projects of the era to better understand why folding a cartridge in half was not as absurd. Oh boy. Burst fire capabilities is a consensual? Ooh, it's a consensual holdover. Now, patents that bear his name include one for a Patents that bear his name include for one a pivotally mounted stock with conventional cartridges. Beyond the single projectile, this design also had an advantage over telescoped. I have here on screen for you a saboted
It struck like a blade, and the man who fired it, he never got paid. Hank took to Texas, then down to the bayou. A voodoo queen whispered, "Boy, I know about you." She gave him a casing, all etched with a rune. Said, "Fire it once, and you'll know the truth soon." He's looking for the bullet, the line that don't stray. Hits like thunder and don't fade away. Silver